Hello, everyone. My name is Saeed. I'm the founder and CEO of Nextstars, and I'm very proud today to be joined by Stephen Green and Rick Spence for another episode of Venture 360 event. We will talk about setting up newcomers for success today. Welcome. I'll give a brief introduction to the two esteemed guest speakers, and I will ask them to introduce themselves, and we have some really interesting topics to cover for you today. So, Stephen is managing partner at Green and Spiegel and has over 35 years of experience in immigration law, and he specializes in helping business leaders and high net worth individuals move into and invest in Canada. Clients ranging from multinationals to startups across different sectors, and he regularly advises on complex immigration matters and speaks at global conferences. Rick Spence is a business writer, entrepreneurship coach, and speaker focused on leadership and entrepreneurship. He has held roles as editor and publisher of Profit magazine and columnist for the Financial Post. With decades of experience in business media, Rick is passionate about helping and inspiring innovation and growth, helping leaders build a stronger and more resilient organizations. He is also known for his engaging speaking style, regularly hosting and facilitating business discussions across Canada. And I just wanted to mention that we are currently this event is held at Cestar College in Toronto, and we are proud to be working with them for their entrepreneurship center. The event is available for the staff and the students of Cestar College as well to participate. Thank you both, and if you can add any points to my introductions, I'd really appreciate that.
Well, Saeed, I think you did a great job. You're correct. I've been involved in the immigration world for a long time. And I really would say that Canada probably has the best immigration system in the world, but it's always growing and evolving. And they look to people like yourself, Rick, myself, to hear about how we can make things better. How can we make our program better for entrepreneurs to come from all over the world and become successful? Because that's what our Immigration Act wants. They want people to become economically established in Canada. And that's really the foundation of our Immigration Act, dealing with newcomers and businesses, economic establishments. So that should always be in the back of your mind when you're looking at immigration, when you're looking at policy. How can this newcomer become economically established in Canada?
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. And say thank you for facilitating these conversations through the Venture 360 series. We're not seeing enough of these conversations, basically. And my specialty is entrepreneurship as opposed to immigration, but the entrepreneurship community as a whole has sort of a fraught relationship with immigration, not sure what to do about it, welcoming to people, but certainly not taking any political stance or anything in most cases about the role that entrepreneurs play in Canadian entrepreneurship, which is huge, and I think we're going to get into it. So thank you just for facilitating this conversation and making sure that these important points are getting raised.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rick and Stephen. So the goal of Venture 360 event is actually to bring stakeholders, experts around the table to surface some practical ideas to help Canada stay ahead in the race for talent. We've always been a destination for the ambitious around the world, and we just are passionate about coming up with practical ways that we can improve what is already existing. Obviously, Canada has a very good brand still, is intact globally, but obviously, always, there's some room for improvement as well. So one of the pathways that has been available for innovators to come to Canada and set up their businesses has been a startup visa. And the question is, how can entrepreneurs around the world globally best position themselves to take advantage of the program, especially in today's competitive landscape?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important before anyone even thinks about using the startup visa program to understand the foundation of it, where they want people, meaning the Canadian government, want people that will bring innovation to Canada, that will create jobs in Canada, that will expand the global footprint of hopefully this successful startup. But it's interesting, and I think important to understand how we got where we are as of today under the startup visa program. I believe the first country in the world to create this startup ecosystem from an immigration standpoint was Chile. Canada looked around, saw what Chile did, and saw what was going on in places like Silicon Valley, in places like India, in places like Israel. And they said, wow, why don't we try to encourage startups from around the world to come to Canada? And they created this startup visa program, I guess almost about 10, 12 years ago. And when it first started, it was fast, like so fast. You could get your immigration to come and begin your startup within 4 to 6 months. And that's what innovation's about. Fast moving. You have to react to the world, because if we don't move fast or react, some new innovative idea will become an old innovative idea in 12 months. So the program was great at the beginning. People were coming very quickly, and people didn't really understand the startup visa program. It didn't make sense to a lot of people, because remember what happened was the Canadian government said, and I thought it was a smart move, said, you know what, we are experts in creating economic, immigration pathways for people, but we don't really know what innovation means. We don't understand it well enough, because it was new then, this idea. And they decided to go ahead and reach out to the ecosystem of incubators, venture capital groups, of angel groups, and said, hey, why don't you go ahead and help us determine if a new startup is innovative, creating jobs, that type of idea. And these various organizations said, sure, we will. And they got involved in the program. And there were some great designated organizations, but there were some that weren't so great. And unfortunately, they started accepting a lot of startups that really weren't startups. And the numbers started to grow and grow and grow, almost to an unmanageable point where no longer could someone come to Canada and do their startup in 6 months, but now 3 years. So the government, moves a little slow sometimes, and they said, whoa, as of April 29th, we're slowing down the intake of this so we can catch our breath, and we can put a little more, due diligence, meaning the government's due diligence, into this program to make sure we're getting the right startups. So they created this cap starting April 29th of this year.
And Stephen, I'm just curious what you think. Was the startup visa program, was it just sort of a secondary casualty in a larger discussion over immigration, or was the looseness of the program itself?
No, great question. So, you started off, Saeed, with your question about, we want entrepreneurs to come here. And I think the majority of Canadians say, of course, we want entrepreneurs to come here. They help our economy, they help our, GDP, everything. But the problem within our immigration pathways was that the government during the past 10, 15 years has cut down the ability of an entrepreneur to come to Canada. We used to have a program called the investor visa, where someone would come in a passive way, invest in a program in Canada, and would get their immigration. The government at the time felt we don't want to do that program anymore, so they closed it off. Then we had another program called the entrepreneur program, where someone would express to the Canadian government, I am either a senior manager in the past, or I've run my own business in the past. I'd like to come to Canada and establish a business. The government said, okay, that sounds like a good idea, but we want to make sure that you're actively involved in the business, that you're going to create job opportunities or maintain job opportunities for Canadian. And we had this wonderful, robust entrepreneur program. But the government again looked at it at the time and said, you know what? We don't really like it. We'd like to improve it. So we're going to close it. So the government closed it. So the only program federally, meaning Canadian program, that exists in all of Canada to come here is the startup visa program. So what it's done is as Rick has stated, it's forced people, in my opinion, that really shouldn't go into that innovative kind of concept into the program. But it's the only way that a business person now can come to Canada. And that created it to also expand too quickly as well. And that was another reason why the government put a cap on it, because there were far too many applicants. And in my opinion, quite candidly, shouldn't have even been in that program, but they had no other pathway to choose.
Yeah. I'm wondering if this is how fixable this is. Canada is a country of immigrants. We've always built our country on the hard work of immigrants, the wisdom they've learned from other places and other cultures and brought to Canada that helps them identify opportunities, the strength of their families and the networks they come into and that welcome them and give them support that they need to do what they're going to do. Canada has been built for that. And we need a program that identifies really good entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial potential and can bring these people in, because these people are a scarce resource. Mm-hmm. Canada needs them. Other countries need them. There's going to be growing competition for these people, for the change they can make and the wealth they can build for themselves and others. So is there a fix for this? Stephen, I guess it's a question for you.
I absolutely think there's a fix for this. I know that many of the immigration officers, the commercial officers that work on behalf of our government around the world, they like this program. We just have to tighten it up properly. And I think it's important to explain to our audience sort of how this program works. So, today, if I am a founder and I have a really innovative business and it's perhaps been operating a year out in India or China or through Europe, in the US, anywhere, I would approach one of these designated organizations that, in my opinion, quite correctly, the government, passed off to them the assistance of determining if this is a proper innovative business. And those designated organizations will examine the startup, look at it, see if it meets the parameters that the government of Canada is looking for. And if they, meaning the incubator or the startup or the venture capital people, think it does, they will then give that startup, the group of people that are involved in it, a letter of support. And with that letter of support, they are able to apply for immigration to Canada. But again, Rick, where you say, how do we improve it? We got to improve it because it's too long. Currently today, it's about 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years to get your immigration. So the government is saying, we've got this amazing program. We've got the Ferrari, but we're missing a little bit of the engine. So we got to fix the engine up a bit. And businesses that are looking to come that have been waiting 2 years, 2.5 years, they're saying now, hey, you know what? My idea maybe is getting a little old, or I'm going to go to the US, or France now has a wonderful program where they're encouraging. There's so many European countries now are saying, hey, you know what? We're going to look to other places. So we're losing this amazing opportunity. Now, the government may say, and they do quite often, hey, we'll give you a work permit to come here and start your startup. But the problem with that concept is, yes, you can come and start up, but a lot of times if you want financing from people at the banks or other people, they're going to say, oh, what's your status in Canada? Because they're worried about getting paid back. Oh, I'm here on a work permit. Oh, wait a minute. We don't really lend money to people on work permits because that's a temporary document. So they're restricted in the way their businesses can expand. So a work permit's hard. If they are in a relationship or they have a family, you say to them, okay, we'll give you a work permit. They come here and 2 years go by and suddenly they get a letter from immigration. Sorry, I don't think you deserve immigration. You don't maybe meet the criteria. So why would someone want to uplift their whole family, come here on a temporary document, and where they may be asked to leave, where that wouldn't occur in other places like in Europe, things like that. So it's got to be fixed, really, from my perspective, speed, because we're talking about a different ecosystem where if you don't have speed of processing, the program cannot be successful.
And I have kids who've been involved. Each of my 3 kids has been involved in immigration issues with significant others. And, there are just months and months and months where you don't know what's going on. And you don't know if anything's happening at all. And that doesn't have to be the case, right? Is it a matter of just throwing enough person power?
Look, there's a lot of applications. Okay. So, you're talking about even, visitor applications are going like this, work permit applications are going like this, student applications have been going like this. So look, our officers are working hard, but there's a way to have technology facilitate this, make it faster. And, in the start,
I hear this thing called AI now that speeds up things like this.
Well, but the government does have a program for some of their temporary processes where it's called Chinook, like the salmon, right? And that facilitates the processing of applications. But it's a difficult area to process, trying to put in a lot of, assistance through AI and so on, because immigration is an emotional process. It's a process where, it's not, 2 + 2 = 4. But if you see 2 + 2 = 5, that's a mistake. You can fix it. But when you're talking about immigration, you're talking about examining, is this innovative? It's people. So there has to be a big people element. And a lot of times Canada loses out on some wonderful people because our immigration system is too, IT-ish, too cookie cutter type of thing, where we have to look at everything and see it. So yes, we have to improve the processing, but we have to keep the human element in it. But, remember I talked about these designated organizations that help the Canadian government make decisions on their behalf with respect to, is it innovative? I think we have to put more responsibility on these designated organizations. And remember, look, they're providing, for example, the incubators, they provide incubation services. They charge for these services. They're making a significant amount of money for the services they provide. So I think they should also be involved in providing good services, great services, that type of thing. And I think now the government, because they put this cap of 10 startups per organization, they're now looking at it and they're saying, hey, if you're going to have this designation, we want more from you. And I think they're going to get it. I think you'll see more responsible decision making from some of these, designated organizations, I hope. And even, the process of becoming designated, it used to involve another organization, and the government said, no, we're going to now look at it ourselves. We're not going to rely on this other organization that helped us decide who should be designated. So they are bringing back, and that's, immigration. Immigration, is always this type of business, up and down. We open up, we sometimes find out we opened up a little too much. Now we're closing, and you've heard these stories about, we're reducing temporary foreign workers, we're reducing students. I mean, that's a whole other issue where I think Canada is really going to suffer, reducing the amount of students because they went the wrong way. They went after the students coming in as opposed to the proper schools, where they should say to certain schools, sorry, you don't keep up with Canada's great standards of education. We're not going to let you have foreign students. That's how they should have done it. But that's a conversation for another day.
Absolutely. Could this problem be at least partially solved if we got rid of that cap and maybe each organization has different capacity and so they could have different thresholds? There are some organizations that were gearing up for this program that can handle a lot more than 10 entrepreneurs a year. And you can't just build up a program and then dismantle it and then build it up again.
Right. I agree, Rick. I think it's a great question. And I think what the government is doing is, this started April the 29th till the end of the year. So each organization gets 10. And then they're going to relook at it in the coming year. And I think this, 6-7 month period will give them time to, and I hope they move fast, will give them time to look at these designated organizations and say, you know what? We have innovation is important. We got to move faster. What is the proper number that we should be looking at that we can process? Or maybe there shouldn't be a cap, but the cap will be kind of self-imposed by the designated organizations where they say the services that we're providing, the services of examination, the compliance that we have to do as a designated organization, we can only do so many ourselves. And, maybe that type of self-regulating concept with the organizations themselves. If the government puts a much heavier burden on these designated organizations, that's something to look at.
Perfect. You probably want to move on to question 2.
Actually, I think like some very, very interesting points were discussed. Time to market is very important for startups. Actually, it's one of the key indicators whether or not the startup would be successful. Some startups are too early to a market. The market is not ready for them. And a lot of the startups, when there's a problem, people talk about it. They can, ride a wave, but sometimes they miss the train because by the time that they get processed, that whole problem is fixed, solved, people have moved on, they're big players, the market has a dominant winner, and it's just impossible to crack into that market after a certain window of opportunity, if I may. So I think a big turning point for this program, because I also remember the early days, as Stephen mentioned, people were getting their visas in 4 to 6 months. Good old days was COVID, right? So I think government was not ready, set up to digitize their workforce and their workflows in an appropriate amount of time. And that created a backlog, and that backlog inevitably, it got out of control and out of hand. But what we are arguing, what we hope to achieve is coming up with solutions, because this sledgehammer, strategy of cutting might not be the best strategy because we miss out on a lot of good opportunities. But and you're absolutely right. The program was not properly administrated by the designated entities, some designated entities, and that kind of all added to the story. But do you think the designated entities, in your experience, like one would hope that they've received, like, the message, they are gonna go be on the lookout for good quality startups. But one wonders, because just of an economics, they might increase the fees, and not that would also create a burden for a good quality startup that may exist, but they cannot afford necessarily the program fees. So
another barrier.
Yes, that adds another layer of barrier. So I think like criteria and also creating diverse pathways might be a way to move forward. But after all, we are, even if these startups are not going to be successful, and not all of them are going to be successful, but it's a vehicle to bring people that are coming to Canada with talent, with ideas, and with some they get equipped through these programs with some business knowledge to operate a business in Canada. So net could actually be positive, nonetheless. So I think one of the questions that we have hosting these events is how can we collect it, because we have some good ideas that has surfaced in these events. How can we voice some of these concerns and bring this message to Ottawa? What's the best way to add to advocacy for bringing immigrant entrepreneurs and newcomer innovators and supporting them in this race for talent?
Well, I mean, look, my experience over all these years, the government loves to consult with business organizations like yourself. And I would say, we should write to the department and make suggestions. I mean, they are currently looking at this program and reviewing it, because that's why they put the cap on. And, any suggestions, I think they're open to. Actually, I know they're open to look and see and consider. But, there's lots of considerations in this program. Remember that, probably the number one reason that people get refused is because they don't recognize that this program requires active participation. This is not a passive program. And that's one of the biggest, in my opinions, responsibilities of these designated organizations that are giving these letters of support, that they work. Remember, the word is letter of support. Support just doesn't mean a wonderful piece of paper. No, it means that I'm here to support you. So if I'm going to an incubator and that incubator is providing me with support, I better get it. And if that incubator does not give that support, then I think the government should look at that incubator and say, well, wait a minute, we designated you because we thought you would be able to provide the support to these new entrepreneurs to Canada. You're not doing that. So I would say to your listeners, if you only have a letter of support and you have been sitting there passively, doing nothing for a year and a half to 2 years, you are in serious difficulty, because this is not a passive program. And that's why, they got rid of this investor program. The investor program was canceled because at that time, the government felt, we didn't want to be seen as selling immigrant visas like the United States does under this EB-5 program. We want active management, and that's been the policy of the government for a long time. Now, that may be changing, and that may be a new pathway, because maybe sometimes a passive investment isn't a bad thing, because we get a great potential entrepreneur coming who has different ideas, And maybe we use some of that investment money for, assisting our infrastructure, our hospitals, our schools. So maybe that's opening up a bit. But as it currently stands today, this startup visa program is an active management. So if you're sitting around for 2 years, really just sitting, or like you would be doing watching the football game on the couch potato, you're in trouble.
It's full body contact.
You got it.
Yeah. Rick, as Stephen mentioned, immigration is an emotional subject, both for the newcomers that want to come to Canada. They put all of their hopes and dreams in a suitcase for a better future and come to Canada to achieve their dream. And also for Canadians that are, they have their bread and butter issue, kitchen table issues, and they often, look at immigration as a way to solve them or to they kind of a scapegoat for some of the challenges. So, given your background in media, what do you think can be done by a collective of people that share the same belief to drive a message to Ottawa and help some of those policymakers to improve the incentive structure around some of these programs?
Well, my favorite cliche is that it takes a community to build a startup, just like it takes a village, as Hillary Clinton used to say. And you and I heard that cliche just a week or two ago in Hamilton at Innovation Factory's Lions Lair showcase event. I think everybody in the community depends on a healthy economy. Healthy economy comes from startups. We've learned that big business can't really be trusted to maintain economic vitality in small towns and regions over the long term. We need vital entrepreneurial energies floating through. So individuals should get involved in this discussion. Communities and city councils should get involved in this discussion. Economic development groups, business improvement areas, everyone's got to get involved in this and get the message across up to the federal government. I mean, I'm really glad to hear Stephen say that the federal immigration people are open to discussions and feedback, and that's a beautiful thing. But we also have to create a demand for the innovation we need, the programs that we need to bring more entrepreneurs to Canada. And so we have to reach our MPs, we have to reach the government, we have to reach our provincial governments as well, and make sure we're laying out the red carpet for these. One of the statistics I read was that I think in Ontario, maybe 40% of small and medium-sized businesses are run by people who weren't born in Canada. So that's higher than you would expect. It's I think about 30% in most of the rest of Canada. I think Ontario and BC were sort of in the 40% range. All the stats I've seen for award-winning companies, really successful, growing companies, 50% of those across Canada are run by people who weren't born in this country, who brought their energy, their culture, their work ethic to Canada. So that's why we need this, because they are a source of new energy, new wealth coming into Canada. So this is very much a national priority, a community priority, and we've all got to get after our MPs and our candidates. There's a federal election coming up within the next 12 months. So we've got to get this message out that says, how are we making life easier for entrepreneurs, and how are we making life easier for entrepreneurs who don't currently live in Canada but want to come here and build that business?
And
it's writing campaigns, it's getting it on the agenda of the Rotary Club and the Calgary Economic Club and everyone else who's concerned about the future of this country.
Right.
Or
Rick, your point with respect to reaching out to groups, organizations, it's got to be pretty frustrating for our economic development officers. And those are people that work for the government, provincial government, federal government, municipal government, that reach out to companies abroad, people abroad to say, hey, come expand to Canada. And right now, the only offering that they can give them from an immigration standpoint is the startup visa program. That's wrong. And, even as of October the 3rd, the government went ahead and restricted the amount of policy flexibility for intercompany transfer. So if you have a company abroad and you want to transfer someone to Canada, they've restricted that. So right now, we're really, in my opinion, targeting the wrong people. And again, I said, things go up and down, up and down. And Saeed, you talked about the sledgehammer. So I think we've been sledgehammering a little too much lately. And maybe we have to, maybe use the little hammer, the one we hold in our hand, not the one we throw over our shoulder, to fix some of this policy. It's so frustrating for me because part of my business, I travel around the world meeting amazing entrepreneurs, and I'm losing a lot of my hair on this side because I scratch my head so often going, I don't know what to do for you. It's a problem, a big problem.
I think one of the important, topics that it keeps coming up is lack of a comprehensive business immigration strategy in Canada. Because people want to come to Canada, is still, the brand is very much intact. People love to come to Canada. We obviously have a very good business environment, amazing education, good healthcare. Can we say decent?
Yes. Very good healthcare.
Well, it's been, yes. We can't complain. People have access, but there's obviously a lot of room for improvement in healthcare as well.
In every country in the world.
Yes, yeah. That also can become an emotional conversation topic. But people want to come to Canada, and like people like Stephen, as they go around the world, as a trusted source for immigration, as an expert for Canadian immigration, you have to give immigration lawyers a Rolodex of programs, tools that they can fit different people in. Because at the end of the day, people respond to incentives, people respond to policy. Like if I want to come to Canada, I will look at my options. And if the options are limited, I will try to use the limited options that I have, or I would go to other countries. Like you mentioned France, Stephen. I've actually helped companies relocate to Netherlands. I think they have one of the better programs. They have their so-called facilitator, which is an equivalent of designated entity. First of all, is industry specific, which is, I think, a key component of providing support. If I'm a med tech company, the types of support that I need is totally different than, let's say, a fintech company or a retail company, or a clean tech company requires advisors that understand the UN, policies, the different types of funds, the NDCs, or whatnot. So, or they go elsewhere. They go other places. I've seen people that more and more are asking questions. Where else I can go? Because I want to be somewhere that I can kick a start in a reasonable amount of time, and I can have some fidelity as to the outcomes. I want to know how fast am I going to get processed. And Stephen, you mentioned the notion of active manager in a startup. Absolutely. But also one wonders, what is the amount of investment that an entrepreneur can put into a company without being really sure about if they are going, whether or not they're going to stay or they're going to ever be able to come to Canada. So
that's the balancing act. You say, I've got this great idea. I'm going to invest money here. I'm starting it. But I don't have my papers yet. What do I do? It's really interesting. We get a lot of questions with respect to students that are here. Canada had an extremely robust student program. We invited kids from all over the world. We've got engineering students. We've got all kinds of wonderful students that are here, have graduated from our universities and colleges. They get something called a postgraduate work permit, and they've created this wonderful startup. They can use this startup visa program to go ahead and get immigration to Canada. So, there's great opportunities, and we don't want to miss these students, these young entrepreneurs. They are the driving force of the world. I mean, people like me, I'm too old for anything now, right? So we want these young, educated people, and the student population is great for that, where they've been educated in the Canadian system. And I remember one minister of immigration used to say they become Canadianized, whatever that means. But it's a great opportunity for students that are here that have innovative ideas that really want to expand them here. And talking about its expansion, it's so interesting. Canada is a signatory to the free trade agreement with the United States, with Mexico, and a lot of entrepreneurs from around the world, they think quite often, they want to enter the United States. Everyone dreams of entering the United States. But to be honest with you, when I have a discussion with them, they kind of prefer coming to Canada as a place to create their footprint in North America, where they come, they establish their startup in North America, they hopefully eventually become a Canadian company, and then they put their little tentacles into the United States, into Mexico. So it's a great opportunity for companies to expand within North America. And the United States doesn't give them that opportunity either. If you have an amazing startup, it's pretty difficult to get into the United States. So I say, hey, come to Canada. We're the IA capital, Ontario here, all this. It's amazing. Come here. And the other thing is, we've got these brilliant, people that have come and studied here. We speak so many different languages in Canada. The hardest asset for an entrepreneur to have in a business is human capital, are the people. But we're so lucky here, I'm talking in Ontario, for example, because I live in Ontario. We're so lucky because our knowledge base, our language base, there isn't, in my opinion, a human capital pool of such wonderful candidates that these startups, these entrepreneurs can use within our wonderful country.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that you just said. So in other words, I'm totally irrelevant here. But I wanted to mention, I believe Canada has more free trade agreements with more countries and bigger markets than any other country in the world because of our unique position as the United States' best close friend, as well as our ties to South America, to Europe, and around the world. So, it's so important we get this right because we have this opportunity to build something great here.
Yeah.
And we know we need more people, so immigration will always be part of what Canada is all about. And the smarter we get about attracting the right people, the better we're going to get. And Stephen, I have to mention, we do have a small audience in this room, and when you're talking, Stephen, they're nodding their heads the whole time.
Okay. Sorry. But, Rick, one of the questions that's come up about, the government on October the 3rd did change the startup visa program, and they came up with this work permit expansion, which permits now someone that is an essential member of the startup to get an open work permit to work, obviously, for the startup. But a lot of times there's a lot of sweat equity in a startup. And unfortunately, they don't have the cash they need. So this work permit is an open work permit, which permits them to do that. But the problem is processing. It is taking too long to get even the closed work permit or these open work permits. So again, we've got to stress that this is a different type of visa. We need people that move in an innovative ecosystem that moves fast, that gets a new pair of running shoes every day. We got to get these people here quickly.
So we've got to invest in the system, basically. We've got to see it as a profit center. The right type of immigration will help the company grow help the country grow faster. And so we have to invest in this platform that is the immigration process.
I just actually, Rick and I have been developing a concept that we call Canadian entrepreneurship. We want to really contrast the way we do entrepreneurship in Canada to US, the holy grail of a startup and ecosystem. We feel that we can do it in Canada in a little bit differently than our friends across the border, in a way that we can prioritize collaboration, sustainability, working together, as opposed to just purely focusing on revenue and the bottom line. But I think, and I was actually at the MedTech conference yesterday, and I had the opportunity of talking to some of the people from the provincial government. And I talked about this concept that we are, people like us, people like Stephen, we are the ambassador of Canada and the Canadian entrepreneurship abroad. As Stephen mentioned, he travels around the world, really advocating for, and I do too. Yes, I have no life, so I travel a lot. And we want to be the ambassador, because this Canada is an amazing place to launch a global startup, a global company. We have consumers from different parts of the world that you can go to get real insights. How can I tap into the Philippines market? Go talk to talk to a neighbor. How can I, you can get some actual intel that's it's immensely powerful in your commercialization journey. But I think one of the questions that comes up, Stephen, I know you have experience also with the U.S. immigration. How do people what are the differences between the two ecosystems? And what changes do you see in terms of trends? Are people more favorable, or are they kind of having second thoughts? How would you advise someone to choose between the two?
Look, I'm a big promoter of Canada. I've been involved in this for 35, 40 years, and I've seen people come to this country. I've seen them be so successful here. I've seen some of them have hard times here trying to become successful. We also, help people go to the United States and become very successful there, and some not being so successful. The programs in the United States are much more restrictive than ours, restrictive in a way that I believe hurts their system. I mean, prior to 1997, when things were changing in Hong Kong, Canada had a wonderful program for people that lived in Hong Kong that came here. US didn't have a program. And Australia had a great program. And we were so lucky and so fortunate to get the business acumen of the people coming from Hong Kong, the skill set acumen of the people, and the US really lost out. So, I think our system, we seem to accept this concept of multiculturalism much better than any other country in the world. As you've said, as Rick has said, we learn from each other. That's the best part about this country, where, we as you said, we want to do work for a certain region outside of Canada. Well, we can find the community in Canada, learn from them, work with them, expand, use their connections. So we're really fortunate that way that we can do that in Canada. In the US, it's much more difficult to do things like that. But again, that's why I've always said, I think Canada is a great place to start with your startup entrepreneurship skills created here, and then expand. And, a lot of times it was interesting, if you look at the retail business, how many retailers, before COVID were in the United States wanting to come up here. We saw this massive expansion of retail outlets in Canada. There's almost none left, because we have a different mentality here of how we operate our businesses, how we work together. And I'm proud of that mentality. And I hope we never, never lose it, because we're lucky to have it.
Absolutely. Part of the what we're looking at as sort of a brand, a Canadian entrepreneurship brand, which Saeed mentioned, is the idea that Canadian entrepreneurs, the Silicon Valley ethic is move fast and break things, disrupt. We have in Toronto, we have an incubator called the Creative Destruction Lab, which is dedicated to that principle. And in my experience, Canadians don't want destruction. They don't want stuff that's brand new. They want stuff that's better. They want to work with suppliers. They want to work with different levels of business to work better, to have better products, better quality, closer relationships, better empathy, to understand what our customer needs or how we can help them become better. And so I think that exactly fits into what we've been talking about, that we have this empathy, which I think is unique in the world. There's empathy everywhere, but is there a country that can make it a brand? I think there is.
But I mean, I do say that one of our weaknesses in our great country of Canada, compared
Before
to
you say that, I'm going to say we recognize there are also some toxic syndromes in Canadian entrepreneurship, such as the lack of willingness to take risks. So we're working on
exactly what I was going to say.
I recognize that.
I love that example. People ask me all the time, Stephen, what's it like doing business in Canada? What's it like doing business in the United States? And I say, you're an international business person. Well, in Canada, international business to a lot of Canadians is walking across the street and doing business with your neighbor. We don't expand out. We're very conservative. So, I think we look to foreign entrepreneurs to teach us how to take that risk a little bit more. And, the United States is great at that. They are able to take risks a lot easier than us. My risk is, ringing my neighbor's doorbell that I haven't met yet.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
I think just recently, Shopify's president also put an op-ed and called out for Canadians to have bigger ambitions and really go for the as in his analogy, go for the gold medal rather than the bronze medal. I think though, as an entrepreneur, I think. Canada inherently is a large country with amazing resources, but relatively a small market. So we have to look outside. We have to, if a company wants to grow, they have to go to other markets. No questions asked. However, I think one wonders, can we create policies and incentive structures for the companies to remain Canadian and do business in the States rather than, relocating with the entire team. And that causes another problem, because when the companies don't scale here, then you don't have the exited founders that they can give back to the community and help the next generation of entrepreneurs to grow. But I want to just say one thing, a startup visa, as our team put together a report, we reviewed the past 3 reports of CBCA, the Venture Capital Association, and merged it with Crunchbase data to really look at what's happening in the Canadian startup ecosystem. What are the challenges? Where does the money go? And the deal flows and everything. Canada specifically is not a very cost-efficient place to start a company. The talent is expensive. Mm-hmm. So we need the capital, to get the company to a stage that has a product that costs roughly around $400,000 to $500,000 at the very least, right? And a lot of sweat equity. So bringing these companies from all over the world that have ideas, that have some traction, they have some dirt under their fingernails, they've some early signs of product market fit. It's a very good investment for us, because, and also for the VC and angel communities here, because the heavy lifting of the early days have been kind of is a bit subsidized. You have a company that has an idea that is vetted, that the product was not maybe it's not mature, but it's a working MVP. So it's actually we shouldn't limit ourselves for this opportunity. I just wanted to say that as well.
So it wasn't a question.
Yes, it was a bold statement. We should, like, I think there's no shortage of good companies around the world. There's no shortage of people that want to come to Canada. But if it takes like 4 years, 3.5 years, 2.5 years for them, like you're gonna you miss that opportunity, like the window of opportunity that you have for market. People are not gonna wait for 2.5 years for you to show up and solve their problems. They've got lives to.
I think that's a great way to wind up. But before we wind up, I have a question for Stephen. As I say, some members of my family have been involved with immigration issues for a number of years, and it really does seem to come down to having faith that their lawyer is doing a good job. Stephen, without we're not here to promote you or anything, but I'm wondering, what can people who want to move to Canada and entrepreneurs and others, what should they be looking for in an immigration lawyer? And what difference does it make who you hire?
Well, I mean, look, I would always say, always check out the person who you're going to have assist you, the lawyer. Find out their background. Have they done a lot of these cases? If the person ever says to you who you're reaching out to get assistance from, I guarantee you, go, no one guarantees. Right? So that's a big sign. If someone says, I guarantee I'll get you immigration, you run. And, it's important that, they understand your family needs, the person that you're working with. What are your main objectives? They should be available. They should be able to answer questions right away, not say, wait, I have to go look. And I mean, obviously, if there's certain things that are legal and you need time to examine, a lawyer, of course, will go back and do that. But, straightforward, simple things. And, reasonable understanding your needs, really. Lawyers, remember that when you use a lawyer, everything is confidential. So if whatever I hear, I can't disclose. If you decide you want to use an immigration consultant, there is no confidentiality there. If a lot of people use consultants, again, look at their education behind them. The consultant, to be registered as a consultant, you take a 1-year course. To become a lawyer, much longer, many years of doing that. So again, and only a lawyer can appeal your case to the federal court. So there's lots of reasons why I would tend to go towards a lawyer. But again, some people prefer to use consultants. Check everybody out. Call the embassy, commercial people. The immigration people won't get involved, but commercial officers overseas, they work with a lot of immigration lawyers because, they have to understand how does it work to get the people they're helping to come to Canada. Ask the person's background. Do they ever teach? What's their position been on national organizations, Canadian Bar Association, things like that. So ask around, ask lots of questions. But I would definitely say, if you hear the word, guarantee you walk.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Thank you so much. That was exactly my closing question as well. And I think it's very important, as a matter of fact, the representative that one chooses in their journey, because there's so much uncertainty when it comes to immigration. So setting the right expectation, educating the newcomers, there's a lot that they can do in their home country to set themselves up for success in Canada. So having access to that resourceful, firm person that really cares about them, that means the world to them, because it's a very big decision. I remember myself, I came as a student, like filling out my forms, going to the embassy. It's a very big decision. So, and I was, a student. So now, think of people that are relocating with their families. There's so many questions that they have. So working with a trusted and trustable person is what you need to do and to have, and that's gonna really help you. We had a bunch of questions also in the comments section, I'm hearing, but unfortunately we're running out of time. and I know like there's a harder stuff. So I will reach out to the speakers with those questions, and I will get answers and revert back in the comment section. I wanted to once again thank you. This means a lot. I appreciate you carving time from your very busy schedule to dedicate your focus and energy and time to a topic that's very important. And it was really insightful for me. I learned a lot myself, and I hope the listeners, the audience, they would take away some also some key suggestions, like some improvements, and we hope.
Let's keep the conversation
Absolutely.
going.
And we hope these like conversations will bring people together from different backgrounds with different perspectives. Look, around this table, 35 years of experience in immigration law, 35 years of experience in entrepreneurship. These are amazing ideas that surface today. And I can't thank you both enough for doing this. And I look forward to continuing these conversations. And we can all contribute a tiny bit to help Canada stay ahead in this race for talent, because other countries are really catching up. Thank you.
Are we going to do more of this stuff? Keep this topic going?
Absolutely. Like Venture 360, we try to do it every month, and we have also some hopes and aspirations of doing a larger event, but details will. Please stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, we finished on time and everything. Nice.
I think we're still live.
Are we still live? Oh, turn this on. Pretend I didn't say that. Thank you for coming. Please help yourself.